It seems like the Z fighters have a little bit of everything. We've got humans, Saiyans, Namekians, a three-eyed person, teenagers that still look like babies for some reason. But even with all of this, we just have a single female fighter on the team. Now, this video isn't going to be me talking about inclusion or anything. This just serves as a segue into the main part of the video. Android 18 is pretty much the only female fighter we've seen from Universe 7, at least one that's part of the main cast. And for me, the big issue isn't that she's the only female fighter, it's that they had two other great options right here too. Chichi and Videl. Two characters with a bunch of wasted potential who could have made a great addition to the cast. Oh, and Android 18, she's not getting off the hook either. Although it's not as egregious with Android 18, it seems like with these three fighters, they kinda dropped the ball a bit. And it's not even because they're not fighters, it's because they've been essentially reduced to nothing even though they had a lot of promise at their first showing. So on today's episode of Missed Opportunities, we'll be discussing what went wrong with these three characters, and how they could have easily become something else. Let's begin by talking about one of the most obvious ones, that being Chichi. I'm sure a lot of you can agree on the fact that she should have been a fighter. Not to say I don't like her as she is now, but I know there's a lot of people in the fanbase that don't like Chichi, usually for unjustified reasons, but the point still stands. And the big general consensus is that she should have been a fighter. It's kinda pointless that she wasn't included. It would have been a very natural addition and would have made a lot of sense. Ever since her first appearance in Dragon Ball as a kid, she was shown to be a fighter. It's how she met Goku after all, and how she ended up marrying him too. You would think the two would probably share this connection of fighting, right? That she would at least retain some sort of passion for it. It's not even like she was weak either. Even as a kid she was strong, but as a young adult in the 23rd World Tournament, she was even more impressive. She was able to somewhat keep up with a very casual Goku, which on the surface doesn't sound too impressive, but for a human who seemingly trained without a master and wasn't going too serious about it, yeah, that is a pretty big deal. And although this might be inaccurate, it's worth bringing up, because at one point, Weekly Jump released some promotional material talking about everyone's power levels. And surprisingly, it showed Chichi at a power level of 130. If we assume this to be accurate, that's a huge power level. Sure, it's not as impressive as everyone else on here, but when compared to an average Earthling, she's basically superhuman, whether or not you want to use this power level. So it seemed like they set her up to be a perfect addition. She'd marry Goku and the two would possibly be training. She seems to have loved fighting for her whole life, and she can only go uphill from here, right? Well, not really. In Dragon Ball Z, she just somehow lost that love for fighting. Now you could point out the fact that she had a kid and that might have been part of it, but considering it was a huge part of her life before, it seems really odd how it just disappeared. You would think she would end up being more important, but really, it's almost as if she was only there so Goku could have Gohan, especially since she's married to Goku of all people. You would think he would at least encourage her. And imagine how strong she could have gotten. She got very strong on her own before the 23rd World Tournament, so with Goku as her husband and training with him, her potential was huge. She could have ended up being one of the strongest humans. Yeah, she was pregnant for some of that time, but afterwards she could have easily begun fighting again. 18 was able to do it, so it's not like that was holding her back. And the weirdest part is, in the Buu Saga she was shown to be training Goten. This was mentioned in the manga and actually shown in the anime. But for some reason outside of this she hasn't been shown to train otherwise? I mean, maybe she has been, but we haven't ever seen it. But imagine if she actually were this whole time. With training all the way from the 23rd World Tournament up to the Buu Saga, she could have been incredibly powerful. But for some reason all that motivation went away. And as a fun side note, in the Garlic Jr. movie Dead Zone, she was actually shown fighting. Even in the Lord Slug movie too. I mean, to be fair, she didn't really do much, but it still was fun to see. And while I would have loved for her to be a fighter in the past, it feels like we're a little too far beyond that point. Even if she begun training now, she's just so far behind everyone else. So we can only really theorize what she would have been like at this point. All in all, it would have been cool to see her fight alongside Goku and Gohan. And Goten, I guess, but Super doesn't really care about him, so that's besides the point. Anywho, next I wanted to bring up Android 18. Now her case is the least egregious of these three, so this section won't be too long. She actually did get some use recently, which is nice. She was in the Tournament of Power and Moro arc. I mean, she's literally engineered to be a great fighter. It would make even less sense for her to be pushed to the side. And yeah, I know she was more so of a background fighter, but she did have some nice moments in the Tournament of Power, mainly with Android 17, Krillin, and against people like Universe 2. And in the Moro arc, well, she does basically as much as everyone else does, which is essentially hold everyone off till Goku and Vegeta get there. And Maris, I guess. Rip my boy. So yeah, as a fighter, I'm content with her. But similar to Chichi, she did have a personality change. And that right there is what really left a bad taste in my mouth. She was pretty much a clean slate before during the Android saga. I mean, she did have a bit of a personality there, but after that arc ended, she and 17 were basically free to do whatever they wanted. They could have done essentially whatever with her. And I mean, she does retain somewhat of that same personality. She's still very sarcastic and somewhat monotone. But there's one trait that they added in that essentially takes up her whole character now. The fact that she's greedy. Like, this was in the Buu saga a bit, and back then it kinda made for a funny joke. You know, she was fighting Mr. Satan and wanted to be paid off to win. I didn't really have any issue with it there. But in Dragon Ball Super, it's almost as if they took that quality and cranked it up to 2000, making it essentially one of her only personality traits that she shows. It's to the point where it seems like the only thing she cares about is Krillin and money. She's been increasingly becoming a one-note character, not caring about others unless money is involved. To be fair, for the Tournament of Power, she didn't know the stakes, which is why she was bribed in the first place. But then again during the Moro arc, she didn't willingly go to fight Moro's henchmen and help everyone. She had to be paid to go there. Now, this isn't exclusive to her either. A lot of other characters suffer from the overuse of one character trait in Dragon Ball Super. Some that come to mind are Roshi, Buu, and even Beerus to some extent, but 18 is one of the worst examples of this. And it's really odd considering that Android 17, her twin brother who was absent for so many arcs, suddenly comes back and is a more fleshed out character than she is, having some good development too, while 18 is essentially left to do nothing with her character. Now, as I've said before and I will continue saying, I know there's a ton of characters to juggle in Super, so I don't expect everyone to have massive and deep developments in their writing, but 18 has absolutely nothing redeeming in terms of personality and character. At least not right now. The good thing is this could easily be rectified. But hypothetically for a second, what if I told you there was another character, one who got sidelined from fighting like Chichi, but one who has a personality even less interesting than Android 18, essentially the personality of a brick? Well, the sad thing is, this isn't a hypothetical character. The one who got worse treatment than Chichi and 18 combined is Videl. This is probably the worst of them all, and subjectively, it's the saddest for me. I really did like Videl back when she was first introduced. Granted, I'm biased because I like the Saiyan saga a lot, but she did start out as an interesting character that played off Gohan well, starting out somewhat as a rival for Gohan, who was able to fight independently and still have a good showing. She was a hero in Satan City, probably just as well known as Mr. Satan, but actually using her power for good rather than fame like Mr. Satan. Conceptually, she was a cool character. She was interesting and even had a good design. One of the rare times we get to see a new human fighter. But then, it just stopped out of nowhere. I'm not going to pin the blame on Dragon Ball Super either. We'll get to that later, but that's not where it started. Right after the saga that she got introduced, once we get to the World Tournament, that's where it happens. After all the things that happened in the Saiyan saga and everything that was established about her, she just does a complete 180. Her personality becomes essentially Gohan's #1 fan and cheerleader. And that's essentially it. But I mean, at least she was still fighting a bit, right? Well, she did fight in the tournament, but her only purpose was really to get beat up so Gohan would get angry. Literally, that's all it was, just a punching bag for Spopovich. She has to have like a world record or something. She was introduced and subsequently dropped so quickly. Like, this happens a lot in Dragon Ball, but not this quick. She's introduced not so many chapters prior, only to get completely dropped. It makes it seem like she has no purpose at all other than getting everyone involved in the World Tournament and giving Gohan a love interest. Especially in Super, because she's only the latter in Super. She just stops caring about fighting for no reason. It's not like Chichi where she actually had a reasonable personality shift that was explained. No, Chichi actually had some explanation, and she still kept some of her fighting spirit. But Videl just stops. She becomes a housewife with the personality of a wooden plank. Every aspect to her that was interesting before in the Saiyan saga, well, it's essentially just erased. She's no longer interesting, she's no longer involved, and she barely even has any chemistry with Gohan anymore. Which is really saying something because they're married here. She had more chemistry with him when she was basically stalking him. The silver lining is that she did become the Great Saiyaman 2, and in GT this is briefly used, as well as towards the end of the Buu saga. But of course, that's also completely forgotten, which is weird because she used to be a hero, even before becoming the Great Saiyaman 2. And then she just decides to stop? It's not like she was an unknown hero either, she was pretty well known in her city. And while someone like Chichi, it's explained why she doesn't like fighting as much, or at least doesn't want her kids to pursue it as their only goal, Videl gets no explanation. As I said before, I think the most fitting way to describe her now is just a cheerleader for Gohan. Like, I'm not saying it's an issue that she's supporting Gohan. The issue is, that's all she does. Nothing else. Gohan wants to be a scholar? Cool, she's happy with that. Gohan wants to start training and fighting again? Cool, she's happy with that. Gohan's accused of cheating? Cool, she's happy with that. A god from another universe steals Gohan's body and starts killing everyone, aiming to eradicate every mortal? Cool, she's alright with that. Joking aside, Videl's kind of a big shame for me. She had so much potential to be so much more. She was a pretty young fighter just starting out, and even without having a grasp on ki or anything, she was really strong by human standards. And then she does get a grasp on ki, only to barely use it. I feel like it's debatable to say who had more potential in their prime, Chichi or Videl. Both had some great potential, but part of me leans towards saying Videl got wasted the most. There was so much that could have been done with her. Sure, she wasn't as strong as everyone else, but she was a teenager when she was introduced. She had so much time ahead of her to train. And not to mention, she's married to one of the strongest guys in the world. And she's rich. Literally the only responsibility she has in her life is Pan. There was nothing holding her back, and there still is nothing holding her back. The only thing stopping her is the writers. But there is a bit of a bright side. I don't see it happening at all, but unlike Chichi, it's not really too late for Videl. They have time to give her some sort of development, and she's still pretty young, so she has time to train and get stronger. Is it gonna happen? Probably not. Would I like to see it happen? Definitely. But I guess for now we can only hope. So I covered 3 women that got kinda wasted. But it feels like I'm forgetting someone. Someone who was probably forgotten by Toriyama himself. Someone who was there almost since the launch of the series, being introduced in one of the early arcs. But I can't quite seem to remember who it is. You know what, I'm probably just imagining things. Like I said, there's not much we could do, just discuss what they could have been instead of what they became. At least some hope exists for Android 18 though, but not so much for some of the others, which kinda sucks. But you know what, I've gotten my points across. These are characters that should have been included in the main cast as fighters, but got sidelined relatively quickly. So what did you guys think? Who got wasted the most? Do you think any of them can have potential growth in the future? Leave any thoughts down below. It is a discussion video after all, so let's start discussing. If you liked the video, be sure to drop a like, and let's try to hit that like goal as well. If you haven't already, why not subscribe, as well as hitting the bell icon to get notified about any future uploads on my channel, including discussion videos like this. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.